Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Johnson, and this is Thought by Thought Healing, where I talk about everything related to chronic pain and chronic symptoms, because current neuroscience really is showing that we can reverse these symptoms when we target the brain instead of the body part that is in pain. This is not to say that your pain is not real. It absolutely is, but it is the brain that's controlling it. So there's lots of hope to be had here. I obviously have my own healing journey, and that's why I'm so passionate about this. I am a chronic pain coach, and my goal in all this is to put as much information out there as possible so that those of you who are new to this have a resource. I come at it from a Christian perspective, so if that's important to you, then you are definitely in the right place and you should subscribe. What I basically do with this channel is every other week I get on here and talk about my approach to healing and my own healing story and journey. And then the other weeks I try to interview other experts in the field, whether that's neuroscientists, doctors, psychologists, other coaches, doctors. I don't know if I said that yet or not, but many different perspectives on mind-body medicine. And today I had the honor of having Tamara Gurin and Rita LaBarbera on. They both recovered from CRPS, and now Tamara wrote a book called Defying the Verdict. And Rita is a mind-body coach, and I'm going to put both of their resources in the show notes. If you want to check out their website, it is defeatcrps.com. And I really enjoyed this conversation for many reasons, but I'm particularly impressed just because CRPS, chronic regional pain syndrome, is a really devastating diagnosis to get. And it's a little bit more challenging than, let's say, my journey, just because they had physical manifestations in their body that showed up. That they could see and have a visual reminder of that I didn't have. I was absolutely suffering and in terrible symptoms, many of them, but they did not show up visibly from the outside. Nobody else could look at me and say, look at this, something that's changing in her body. And so it was really cool to hear their story of reversing even those types of symptoms. So I think that's all I want to say about that. So without further ado, I give you Rita and Tamara, and I hope that you enjoy. Bye. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Jen Johnson. This is Thought by Thought Healing. And today I have the honor of having Tamara and Rita with me. Thank you both so much for making the time to come.
You're very welcome. It's an honor and pleasure.
Great. So this is my first time doing it with 3 people. So the listeners will have to bear with us as we most definitely will talk over each other, but we'll do our best. So, okay. So Tamara, let's just start with you. Tell us just a little bit about your symptoms. We're here because these two both have a history of reversing CRPS. And maybe, let's see, Tamara, maybe you can just start us off with telling us what CRPS is.
Oh, CRPS is sometimes called a suicide disease. And what it is, it's neuropathic pain measured on a scale that well exceeds the 1 to 10 scale that the pain is officially measured on. And the estimate is that CRPS pain can be experienced on the level of childbirth or amputation of fingers or toes. And when childbirth ends, it ends. With CRPS, the pain never stops. So it's severe neuropathic pain. Eventually, the limbs, it starts usually in the limbs. Sometimes it spreads throughout the body. The limbs eventually get swollen, balloon to unrecognizable shape, turn red, purple, blackish. People beg doctors for amputations.
Yeah.
And if they get amputations, what they sometimes get instead is phantom limb syndrome, when the hand is gone, but pain is still there. And so people with CRPS usually lose their jobs. They go on disability. A lot of them get addicted to opioids because they have to take some serious doses of opioids. They usually are very poor because they can't work. So it's usually a very horrible story of, in my opinion, disintegration of a personality, because people live in severe, catastrophic pain day and night. And so that's what CRPS is. I was very lucky. I recovered very quickly. I was diagnosed fairly quickly. A lot of people don't get diagnosed for years. Rita's case is like that. It took me 2 years to recover. Some people suffer from CRPS for 20, 25, 30 years. So that's CRPS. So Rita, if you want to add to the picture, feel free to step in.
Oh, well, no, you described it perfectly. You painted the picture. Yes, I certainly experienced a great deal of what Tamara described. And, I think really we're here to spread the word about CRPS recovery and to let people know that this is doable. You can recover. I think the label of CRPS is so scary and people feel so alone when they receive this diagnosis. And so we really just want to depathologize and destigmatize and free people from this label. And that's why I love your, by the way, I love your moniker, Jen, thought by thought healing, because really, just as our symptoms are temporary, our thoughts are temporary, and our thoughts are what control our physiology. And so that therein, I mean, you encapsulated the entire recovery process right there. So I guess I could give you a little bit of my story if you want to hear.
Yeah, I was thinking, so I love that, Tamara, you started with what is this thing?
Yeah.
What does it feel like? And Rita, and Tamara, I know you believe this too, but there's hope. That's not the end of the story, is I have this thing that's manifesting this invisible or in this visible way. So I'd love to hear both of your stories of kind of what led up to understanding TMS, and then maybe we'll pause for a second and then talk about your healing story and what that looked like. But before we do that, I am curious, and I'm not quite sure how to verbalize this, but most TMS sufferers do not have something they visually look at that is a reminder. We don't have a visual, something that scares us on a daily basis. Aside from CRPS, do you know of any other TMS labels, diagnoses that have a visible manifestation that we can kind of throw into this to encourage other people who are listening? Do you know of anything else that comes to mind?
Rita, you want to take this? No. Okay, so I'll take this one.
Yes.
CRPS has a very complicated picture. And really, to diagnose CRPS, doctors use something called Budapest criteria, where you have to have 3 out of 4 symptoms in different areas. And so some of them are cardiovascular. For example, you may have some equivalent of Raynaud syndrome,
Okay.
where your fingers, your blood circulation all of a sudden stops, and your fingers turn purple or white or blue or whatever other color, or it could be skin changes where skin would start feeling very thin and very shiny. Or it can be that you will have spasmodic activities like dystonia, which is involuntary contraction of muscles. But each one of those, well, and neuropathic pain is really one that prevails in all of them. So each one of those on itself can be TMS. In my case, the worst part of it was dystonia. So I was really looking into the world of people with dystonia, and I'm firmly convinced that dystonia, which by the way is also considered incurable and is not treatable by official medicine other than by horrific procedures like nerve blocks, like operations, all kinds of things that don't help, only increase the anxiety and drama for the patients. Dystonia, in my firm belief and opinion, is TMS. And so dystonia is a completely separate branch of neurological conditions that is not treated as TMS as any kind of psychosomatic condition by official medicine.
Yeah. Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up because I work with people who have dystonia, and yeah, yes. So, okay. So go ahead, Rita.
If the body has the functionality to do something, the brain can co-opt it. So people have been functionally blind. People have literally gone blind that weren't blind. People have been paralyzed, that there was nothing wrong with their legs. The brain can create absolutely anything under the sun. And, there are many, if you think about just getting a rash, I mean, just even garden variety things that you can see visually, a rash, Raynaud's, color changes. I had very dramatic visuals. I had bone marrow changes. I had swelling. I had color changes, temperature changes. So the brain can do anything. I've even seen people with oozing blisters. The brain will alter the physiology after a while, and at its most extreme, you can die. My grandfather died from grief. My grandmother passed away. He was 72, and 3 months later, he died from heartbreak, from grief. There was no other explanation. So emotions can literally cause death. Not to be morbid, but my point is the brain can do anything, including death. So
yeah, our brains and our emotions are incredibly powerful, and we undermine it all the time in, I'm going to say in the medical system, but yeah.
So out of the most visible, Raynaud's is one of many, allodynia, skin changes, hypersensitivity to cold or heat, or touch. All of those things, they're visible, they're tangible, but they are TMS.
Yeah. Yes. So we are very clearly saying CRPS is TMS, dystonia is TMS. All these things are reversible. I just wanted to repeat that in a really clear sentence for everybody listening. Yeah.
Absolutely. So important to understand that it's temporary, reversible.
Yeah.
And since we started on this, I think each one of us have seen people who try to take the TMS route, and they try and try and try.
Yeah.
And for years, they cannot succeed. And there are many reasons why people cannot succeed. But what I have seen most often is when they go through the motions of TMS healing, in a way, mechanically. They go through the steps, but they don't go to the heart of it.
Yeah.
The belief
Yeah.
that you can succeed, the doubt that you have to dispose of, the fear that dominates your life. They just go through the steps, but they don't deal with their emotional state, with their emotional underpinning. And that's what keeps them from getting healed.
Yeah. It's the saying the things that we want to believe, but not believing them at the in
In
the
your heart.
core, in the emotional, in the
Right.
thought, in the mental belief system. Yeah.
You have to believe before you see. People want to see in order to believe. It doesn't work that way. And Dr. Sarno's entire sine qua non, if you will, was accept the diagnosis. In other words, believe that your thoughts control your physiology. This is benign, this is temporary, and this is reversible. That was the premise. And in order to use this approach, and in order to recover, you had to accept, you had to believe that statement.
Yes.
And it's really important.
I want to repeat what Rita, you just said. You have to believe before you see. And that it's so counter what we think. We're like, well, we'll try out this therapy, and if it works, then whatever.
Right.
And with TMS, because of the neuroscience of how it works, I'm not saying this for you guys, I'm saying this for the listeners. We have to believe it first, and then we will see it. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if it's just a mustard seed of belief, even if you could just be open-minded enough just to suspend your disbelief and surrender to the truth, because Dr. Sarno was a champion of the truth. So if you can just surrender to that and let go just enough, then you can cultivate belief, and your belief will grow. A spark of belief precedes a miracle, right? So miracles are supposed to happen. They happen every day. And in some cases, it's just a shift of perspective.
Yeah.
In that respect, my transformation is very interesting because I come from technology science background. I doubt everything. I doubted everything. I was extremely suspicious of any treatment that was offered to me. When I discovered Dr. Sarno, I was extremely suspicious of Dr. Sarno himself. I looked from every side and angle, and I was questioning and questioning and questioning. And then I realized that what he was saying was very logical. So, and I'm a very logical person, I think. But after I realized that what he said made sense and was logical, it took me almost a year to go from logical, rational acceptance of it to believing in my heart. And it was only when it became automatic. Oh, yes, that's because of my emotions. Oh, yes, it's because of my repression of emotions. When it became automatic, only then I really started healing.
So you spent a year, is it fair to summarize that and say you spent a year kind of unlearning your doubt and
cultivating my belief?
That I find to could be encouraging for a lot of people, that it's okay to take your time to wrap your head around this and get behind it and understand the neuroscience and what is happening, because once you do get there, it is very logical. But like you're saying, it takes some time to look at what is happening here and what's the science.
Because rational is conscious, but what you're dealing with is subconscious. And underneath, we are emotional, subconscious beings. And no rational reasoning with subconscious can get you to the results.
So what does get you to the results?
I'm sorry, what?
So what does get you to the results?
It's believing in your heart that you can heal. It's making it automatic. It's the first thought that comes to your mind before you start really thinking it through, that yes, this is my emotions, this is how I respond, this is my emotional response to the events of the day.
Yeah. Yes. I love seeing that shift when clients stop showing up with the symptoms and start showing up with, oh, I had this emotional, and start talking about the difficulties of the day or the week, subconscious ones that are coming up or conscious ones, whatever. That's always the shift that it's like, yes, okay, yeah, we're getting
Yeah.
there.
Well, they're finally addressing the cause, they're not preoccupied with the symptoms anymore. So you're freeing the body from the mind's purpose and you're addressing the cause. And I think logic and science can start the process of the ball rolling for belief. For me, it made sense when I read Healing Back Pain. It made complete sense to me. And so it wasn't so hard for me to believe because it made sense. And I did see myself in every page of the book. It was a revelation for me. It was almost like some kind of spiritual awakening in a sense. So that started it. But yes, I think it also requires, as Tamara said, you have to believe, you have to trust in the approach, believe in yourself. If you, a portal to belief is spirituality, believing in something greater than yourself and trusting in God. I think one of the quotes, a well-known quote is, fear is not of God.
Yeah.
Good point of view. And from a psychological point of view, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So if fear is the emotional form of doubt, really. So when you reduce the fear, the belief goes up.
Yeah.
And you really have to fight your fear step by step, in little steps, day after day. You have to convince yourself that your fear is always unfounded. I literally had to work with myself because I had a fear of pain, I had a fear of dystonia, I had a fear of symptoms. And so I had to literally work with myself, convincing myself, look, you had a fear, but you tried this and nothing really bad happened. One of the things that Dr. Sarno was telling people was to dispose of all the crutches, right? All the props that you use. Oh, you have to, like, I was sleeping on the couch because my arms had to hang down to tame the pain that I had. That's absolutely mind-blowing. It's like completely destroying my life, burning pain in my hands. So if I had my arms hanging down, I would be able to sleep. Guess what? After I read his book, I decided to move back and sleep, not on the couch, but on the bed, not sitting, but lying. And guess what? It didn't get worse. And I go, oh my God, I was fearing it, but it's not that bad. And so you have to go through all these little victories day after day to convince yourself that your fear is often unfounded.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. And that fear, when you're using the word fear, you are sometimes meaning doubt too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We see a lot of questions. People ask questions. We get questions through our website. And people ask questions. They would say things like, or on the TMS form, people would say, I do believe it's TMS, but whenever you have but, that means that you do not believe.
Yeah.
It's true. And people say they believe, but they really don't. And I can determine that very quickly. And I think fear stems from doubt. So part of like renewing your mind, if you will, part of transforming your thoughts is calling those doubts into question and asking yourself, is that really true? You know, I had a lot of horrible thought habits, and I had to become aware of those thoughts. And I had to ask myself, is that really true? Is that accurate? I had to replace it with logic and accuracy. And so that began the process of in many ways, rebuking the doubt. Doubt is poison. It keeps people stalled. It keeps people stuck. It delays progress. And doubt has to be, and I know you had Dr. Dan Ratner on, who is the doubt ninja, and it must be eradicated because it is the enemy of belief. So
I love just simple statements like that. It's, I mean,
but
obviously,
I want to simplify this process because I think Tamara and I had to do a lot of trial and error. And now that we have like channels like yours, Jen, and we have Tamara's book, which we can accelerate the process. It's all, we have all the resources for people so that they don't have to go through what, you know, we can spare them of the time and energy and waste of money. And, you know, we can accelerate this and simplify.
But I also want to acknowledge that doubt is a natural step in the process. So it's not that doubt is always bad. Doubt is good when you go through that and you dispose of it eventually. So there is nothing wrong with being doubtful. There's nothing wrong about it. It's just part of the process.
Yes. Skepticism is often a healthy thing. It shows that you're a critical thinker. But I think that one thing I would really recommend to anyone listening is check out the Thank You Dr. Sarno.org site. It's a compilation of success stories and thank you notes to Dr. Sarno. And it's so inspiring. And if you're at all skeptical, I think this could really bolster your belief. I know for myself, I was very grateful to the people who helped me on the TMS Wiki, which is where Tamara and I eventually crossed paths. But, you know, I'm so, when you see how grateful people are and you see their stories, it really makes your belief more robust, in my opinion. I really urge people to look at the success stories. Don't go online and Google labels and, you know, fall into the trap of the mythology and the propaganda online. Look at the people who got better, who recovered, and listen to the experts in the field.
A couple questions there. Diagnoses can often hold us back and be just a proponent of doubt and of fear. And so oftentimes, including myself, I ask people to shed the diagnosis. I am no longer this label, this thing. Do you feel the same about CRPS? Because I know we haven't even got to your stories yet, but Tamara, you were saying one of you got your diagnosis early and one not. What is the diagnosis of CRPS helpful, or is it one that you end up letting go of and calling TMS?
Exactly. Yeah, the latter.
Okay.
I'm so anti-label. I'm the most vehemently anti-label, anti-terminology person you'll ever meet. I'm really plain spoken. I use words like habit. I don't use a lot of scientific jargon because it creates a nocebo effect. And labels can feel so permanent. There's something about a label, you know, like a joke, like a Campbell soup. It feels so permanent, and you're not a Campbell soup label. I wrote a blog about that, but the permanency, and also, you know what I don't like about labels? It implies that they know the cause, when actually that's not true. They're slapping a label on symptoms. They're not telling you anything about the cause.
Yeah.
And so misleading. And what I want people to understand is that no matter what label you've been given, whether it's CRPS or irritable bowel or fibromyalgia or sciatica, whatever the label, the same methodology applies to all of them. The way out is the same for everybody. So that's my little polemic on labels.
Okay.
But-
So that,
but I have a slightly different take on it.
oh,
Okay.
Because what Rita describes is the end point, but I am logical and methodical. So I went through the multiple steps. Step number one was misdiagnosis. I was given a diagnosis of carpal tunnel syndrome. And it didn't make any sense to me because it didn't match my symptoms. But being methodical and logical, I started fighting with my doctors over a correct diagnosis. And it became an obsession. And I needed to have the right diagnosis. And then eventually I found out that what I had was CRPS, but it wasn't an official diagnosis. So I went on a fight with the doctors to get an official diagnosis of CRPS, as if it was making it easier for me. And at that time, I already knew about Sarno, and I already knew that in his book, Mind-Body Prescription, he listed a CRPS under RSD name, as it was known at the time, as one of supposedly TMS conditions. Guess what? For me, it was very important. Even though carpal tunnel syndrome was also in his book, I needed to have a proper label. So once I had the proper label, everything was in place. I had my structure. I had CRPS. It was in the book. Guess what? I can use Sarno as a guidance. That was my path. Guess what? Now I feel exactly like you do. It's all labels. I tell people all the time. Sometimes I see the post on the TMS forum and people list all of their symptoms. And I usually tell them one thing: the more bizarre your symptoms are, the more of them you have, the more likely that it comes from one place. And it is only one place that is central for everything in your body, and that is your brain.
yeah.
And if it is coming from your brain, what you have is TMS. It is so simple, but it took me literally several months to go through all these steps one by one to arrive to a correct conclusion. But that's me. That's people, and a lot of people of my personality type and of my analytical mind. A lot of them, they end up in the TMS world because, you know, because we tend to ignore the emotions.
Right.
We tend to repress our emotions. So we end up with all this chronic pain. So I think it is important for those people to understand the steps that I went through that inevitably leads to the right conclusion. That is all TMS, and it's all just labels.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really about taking your power back. That was Dr. Sarno's whole thing, to empower people so that they weren't enslaved by the medical industry anymore.
Yeah.
That was a huge discovery to me, exactly, that it was I was no longer relying on doctors, diagnosis, medical instruments and tools that they had, analysis, insurance companies. It wasn't my power, but it's a huge responsibility because at that point I knew that I was responsible 100% for my recovery.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's interesting. Some people struggle, once they discover it's TMS, they struggle to leave the medical world. And some people just jump right out. And I was one of those people that was like, well, I'm done. I don't need to go to the doctor anymore. I guess I'll keep insurance because I need to have a dental cleaning and my annuals, whatever. But yeah, I wanted to take my power back and heal myself.
Yeah, I would say don't make the medical model your church. You know, don't have this devotional trust in a system that's really, let's face it, it's profit driven. There's a lot of greed and ego. It's an industry. At the end of the day, it's an industry. So yeah.
Can we talk about that briefly? Because I barely had any visible, sure, zits or whatever other things that visually manifest from stress. I didn't have a lot of that visual reminder. So I have two questions with that. One is, do you have tips for people in how to work with that visual preoccupation with the manifestation on your body, in your body? And also, um, um, when you have something that's visual, is there a need to continue in any sort of medical therapies in that is different than TMS? And maybe talk about both those things. Start wherever you want to.
Yeah, I would say don't be tricked by the visuals. Don't be tricked. They're temporary, they're meaningless. Don't fall for it, because it's another layer of preoccupation. It's another defense for the TMS to hide behind, essentially. So don't fall for it. And that was something Dr. Sarno always said, don't be fooled, just because it's visual. And for me, it is very dramatic, if you will, and it does affect your self-image when there's something visual, and it does make it seem somehow more terrifying when you see it. But I would say just don't be fooled. It's still temporary. I mean, pregnancy is temporary, and that's a visual. So
yeah, and we know that after 9 months or less,
it go back to normal. The body is incredibly resilient. Our bodies we're not fragile. We are so resilient. We do bounce back. So don't be fooled by that. And don't do any treatments that revolve around symptoms or visuals. You want to get away from that, and you want to shift focus away from the body to your inner emotional world and to your life. It's about your life at the end of the day. It's not about these symptoms.
It's another form of doubt. If people are, if people are swayed by the fact that, let's say they have a rash, well, you need to know that after a while the rash will go away. This well-known joke about flu. If you take drugs, it will end in 7 days. If you don't take drugs, it will end in a week. So it's the same thing. You can continue taking drugs for your rash or for the swelling, or in my case, something that was really very difficult for me was dystonia, when I couldn't put my hand on the table like flat. My fingers were just clenched like this, and they wouldn't open and they wouldn't close. I couldn't make a fist. I couldn't open it up. So I lost dexterity in my hands. I couldn't sign. I couldn't put my signature because my fingers would refuse to cooperate. And so for me, that was the hardest of all. But slowly, as I was meditating my way out of my CRPS, the last one to come out of it was dystonia. It was the hardest, but it went away.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
that was your last one.
I had a ton of visuals as well. And the trap people fall into, a big pitfall, is they get into this, they start body scanning and checking and monitoring, and it becomes very OCD, where they're constantly in a state of hypervigilance, like checking themselves in the mirror. I've had clients who take their temperature every 50, it becomes a form of OCD, health anxiety. And so I would say really stop checking, don't engage, control that compulsion, don't engage that behavior, because it feeds the strategy. And yes, in my case, I had mobility issues. I had very swollen red, purple knees. My feet would change colors. I had bone marrow edema. I had it was really distracting, if you will, but that's the whole point. It's there to distract you. And so my brain really created enormous distraction, and I had to get to work, and I had to address the cause and stop getting distracted, because I was avoiding a lot of emotions that weren't aligned with my self-image for a long time. I was in repression mode for a very long, for many years. So everything that's happening to you it's not happening to you, it's actually happening for you.
Yeah.
So it's happening so that you can change things in your life, and you can free yourself from the way you've been living and the prison you've been in, and you can ultimately find more joy and inner peace in your life. So I kind of went on a tangent there, but
I love it.
And if there is something that you still have these obsessive tendencies, it is much better, way more productive to redirect your obsessive tendencies towards looking at improvements. And I made a point, in general, I'm very skeptical, and in general, I was never a very positive person. I literally made an effort to look at every improvement, and I would just go and celebrate all of my little improvements.
Yeah.
You know, my symptoms lifted, my dystonia, for example, loosened up for 20 minutes. I would celebrate, I would think about it, I would take a note of it. Before I learned about Sarno, I had spreadsheet. I had this huge spreadsheet where I took, every column was on one of my symptoms, and I would rate them. 3 points on dystonia, you know, I had color changes to this many points, and then I would calculate the total score, and I go, my God, my score is getting worse and worse and worse. So I reversed that. I actually start looking at improvements, and I would obsess over improvements.
Yeah.
And that actually took my mind away from negative
right.
to the positive.
Yeah.
And
I had that
always
similar.
recommend people obsess over your improvements, celebrate them.
And is it fair to add to that the improvements of emotional triumphs and thought triumphs? And I just found like celebrating the power that the empowerment, I call it empowerment, just because I come at this from a perspective of being empowered by God. So anytime I chose to live in that, and then I would celebrate it, whether it was symptom related, emotion, mind, whatever, that celebration is just powerful for our brains.
I stopped being so hard on myself. That was one of the first things I did.
Yeah.
I would, if my house was messy, I would let it be messy. Oh, well, I'll get to tomorrow. Nothing catastrophic is going to happen. And I kind of would celebrate not being perfectionistic or saying no, or not being such a goodist, because I was a goodist. That was one of my problems. And I was a big worrier, and I stopped worrying about the little things. I would let things go. You know, I wasn't generating so much inner tension, because I would start letting things go, and I would think about, well, what do I want? What would make me happy? What am I good at? What would I like to do? Or things like that. And one of the things that motivated me was to get better so that I could help others. You know, that was a huge motivator, that I could pay it forward the way people had helped me on the wiki. And one of Sarno's big things was, in order to expedite healing, he would have recovered people help those that were still suffering. That was a big part of his work. And so, that was highly motivating to me.
Yeah.
Definitely helping other people on the TMS forum became a huge part of my recovery. And so in a lot of ways, as I was explaining to other people why what they have is TMS, I was convincing myself even more that what I had was TMS.
Yeah.
Yes. If you want to help yourself, help other people. It's
exactly.
Best advice I can give. And it's not always so altruistic because you're actually helping yourself. And so, yeah, it's a win-win, right? It's a win-win. You're helping others and you're helping yourself. And it really is the most effective way to feel better about yourself and to like yourself more. And that will propel you forward, and you'll have more self-compassion, and you'll feel better about yourself in general.
Yes.
That promotes healing, that promotes recovery. And
my mother used to say that the best business is to give to other people without expectation of a payback.
right.
And somehow she was a very generous person, and she was giving a lot to other people, and somehow she was getting return from it in very unexpected forms and shapes. And that's probably the biggest lesson I learned from her.
I like that. Yes. Okay, so we have definitely gone about this in a roundabout way, but
It's not the typical timeline.
no. But okay, let's just start this time, Rita. Let's start with you. What parts of your story do you feel like, if you were you, umpteen years ago or whatever, would you want to hear about your story?
Oh, in terms of, you mean what I learned, in terms of emotionally, how to be, or do you mean in terms of the mistakes that the story itself is complicated, but the recovery part isn't as complicated, believe it or not.
Okay.
But I guess I could start a little bit. I'll weave in what I learned within my story. We'll do it like that.
Okay. Sounds good.
So basically, I was one of those people that I had other forms of TMS before CRPS. For example, I had interstitial cystitis after I got married. And so that was a big example. And that just sort of mysteriously went away. I didn't know about Dr. Sarno at the time, but I think I got focused on other things in my life and my brain got diverted, and so it went away. Yeah. But then after my younger son was born, he was diagnosed with autism. And I found myself on this really devastating trajectory, if you will, of just relentless stress and caretaking and advocating for my son. And things got really bad. My son lost all his words. He regressed. And, I was just so heartbroken, and I was in such survival mode that I had to, just to survive, I really didn't have the luxury to address my emotions, and I started repressing a lot. And there were a lot of really unacceptable, unbearable, ugly emotions that weren't in alignment with myself and my image as a good person and a loving mom. So a lot of repression started happening. And when you fast forward 5 years, I started having pain in both legs, mysterious leg pain. This went on for like 1.5 years, and I went to all sorts of PTs and doctors and bouncing around, and nobody could help me. I was taking tons of tramadol, like opiates, and luckily I remembered, I was like a big fan of Howard Stern, and I remembered him talking about this Dr. Sarno. So I Googled it and I ordered healing back pain. And when I read that, that's when everything started to make sense. And I had a huge epiphany, and I was one of those book cure people. Okay. So I got better in 4 months just from reading the book, just from the knowledge. But I still had more work to do. I had to go deeper. And a few months later, my brain upped the ante, and the whole CRPS started in my right foot, in my big toe. And basically, it started in my right foot, in the big toe. It spread through the foot, and then it did this mirror image. And right there, you see the involvement of the brain with the mirror image.
Yeah.
And so then eventually it spread to both the knees, and things just, I was misdiagnosed. It took me 6 months just to get the label of RSD, which it was called RSD back then. And I was misdiagnosed with Lyme disease. I went down all these like really dark rabbit holes, like Lyme and rheumatoid arthritis. And so I wasted a lot of time and money, and the confusion and the feeling of being lost just added to my doubt and fear and terror. And then finally I was given the label of CRPS. And then, not to skip over, but some of the medical treatments I tried, which were completely ineffective, were nerve blocks, drugs, calamari therapy. I flew to Europe to get bisphosphonate infusions. And then lastly, I had high dose protocol ketamine infusions, which was really dreadful. And it was very traumatic. And I think I had PTSD just from the ketamine, because we're talking like you're hallucinating for hours and hours, and it was very high protocol. And so, things got really bad, very dark. I was bedridden. I could barely walk. I could barely get to the bathroom. I had to use a wheelchair. My mobility was really nil at that point. And so fortunately, this was like after a year of suffering. I called Dr. Howard Schubner, and he was kind enough to return my call. And I told him what I was going through. I had this crazy label, RSD, and it didn't really resemble anything I had read about. And he said that, no, it's still your brain. The genesis is still the brain. It's still TMS. It's more dramatic, but it's still. So at that point, I knew I was going to turn the battleship around. And I lost all my fear of the symptoms. I realized that, they had no power over me anymore. I saw them for what they were, which were false alarms. And so I lost the fear, and I started to crawl out of the abyss at that point. And so, yeah.
So with your recovery or reversal, I just want to hear you say this. Did the visual representations change?
Oh, yes. Well, yeah. So over time, it was a trajectory of betterment with lots of ups and downs, and it took me much longer than for most people, because as I said before, there weren't as many resources at that time. So it was a lot of figuring things out on my own. And I was also going through a divorce, and I have a severely autistic child, so I still got better. And so within a few months of being bedridden, I was going to the grocery store. My fear was going down. My mobility was getting better. I was building my confidence and my belief. I had therapy. I was addressing the emotions. And then over time, all the visuals go back to normal, because you see, the brain and body have an innate ability to return to homeostasis. We're designed that way for self-repair. So everything goes back to normal. And so now I can wear high heels. I can, I don't have to wear big Crocs anymore. I have no limitations. I have no, I don't live in fear of this idea of remission is another nonsensical term. There's no remission for the human condition. I'm always going to have anxiety once in a while. It's in my life, but I have no fear of symptoms returning, because even if they do, they would be transient. I would say, oh, I must be stressed. I would deal with the stress and they go away. So Tamara and I consider ourselves, I guess, cured, complete. No, I'm not cured of being human, but I'm cured of this silly label that was put on me. So,
yeah.
If I may add to that, I think the visuals, and Jennifer, you keep bringing this conversation back to the visuals, that seems to be very important to a lot of CRPS patients.
Yeah.
I want to give them an analogy. Let's say you poked your finger, infection got in, and now your finger is swollen, and you go to the doctor, they give you antibiotic, are you still obsessing that your swelling will never go away? No, you do not, because you know that antibiotic will do the work and your finger will eventually be normal. It is exactly the same thing. Yeah. Your body has the ability with the antibiotic to reverse the condition. It is exactly the same for TMS. Your emotional work is that antibiotic. You're retraining your body. It's not as dramatic maybe as antibiotic, where you take a pill and swelling starts going away, but it is the same mechanism. You start working on your emotions and swelling will eventually go away, like it did for me, like it did for Rita. I couldn't put my hand down on the table. It just wouldn't work, and it was in pain. Guess what? Now I can put it on the table. I do push-ups. I do yoga. I have no problem with that. Why? Because I did my emotional work. It was that antibiotic that took care of my swelling.
Yeah.
And people need to understand that. They just need to believe that this treatment is going to work for them. But they have the difference between antibiotic and emotional work is that in this case, responsibility is on you. Yeah. You have to be that antibiotic, and it's much harder. Looking back, when I read the book and I thought, well, I'm going to heal myself using this, using Dr. Sarno's method, I thought I will be fine in 3 months. Guess what? It took me 2 years. Yeah. And I'm really very skeptical of any frameworks that tell you, oh, you do this. Even if they're TMS-based frameworks, you take this, you do this, and you will heal in 5 weeks. Yeah. This is your framework. You just go through the motions and it will work in 5 weeks. No, you have to go at your own pace.
Yeah, it's a process. Don't be results oriented. And there was something I wanted to say and now I'm forgetting. It was important. Oh gosh. Oh, I'm sorry. I just had a brain.
We'll come back to you.
It's okay.
It was something I really wanted to make a point of. It'll come back. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, Tamara, why don't we go with some of your story?
So I had one day I woke up and my arm was swollen from elbow to the wrist, and my middle finger curled in, and my whole arm my whole hand and wrist, everything was in pain. And I went to the doctor. They told me it was carpal tunnel syndrome, and they gave me whatever the brace, and use the brace and it will go away, and it wouldn't go away. And then the pain spread. It started going up the arm, spread to the shoulder, and then it jumped onto the other hand, and my other hand started curling in. All of my fingers curled in. And really, in a way, the dystonia, that curled in fingers, was my rescue, because if it wasn't that, I would have accepted carpal tunnel syndrome, because, that's what doctors say. But I kept fighting. I kept asking them, whatever you're offering me, this steroid injections, the surgeries, would they uncurl my fingers? And they would go, well, but it's going to reduce your pain. Well, but what about curled fingers? And so the curled fingers really got me out of CRPS, because I knew that whatever diagnosis they were giving me was a wrong diagnosis. And then I was very lucky that someone suggested Dr. Sarno. And at first I dismissed it. Well, he is a back doctor. Why are you recommending me Dr. Sarno? My problem is everywhere except the back. At that time, I already had pain in feet, in ankles, in all of my arms. And so I said, well, back is the only place where it doesn't hurt. And so she said, well, they saying that it works for other body parts. And I read the book, and that was my epiphany. So that's kind of a shorter version of my story. And it took me about 6 months from the beginning, from the first symptom to discovery of Dr. Sarno by way of acupuncturists, herbs, diets, all kinds of stupid things that they wanted me to do. The only thing I was adamant about, I refused any opioids. They offered me tramadol, and I said no, because I didn't want to be addicted.
Yeah. Oh, I'm thankful for you. What about you, Rita? Did you go down the opioid route?
Well, I did. I was taking up to 8 tramadols a day at one point, but then my body started to reject it. I started vomiting. And when that was when I had the mysterious leg pain. And then later on with the CRPS, I was prescribed, like fentanyl and methadone and things like that. And I ended up in the ER a couple of times because luckily I can't tolerate opiates.
That was your luck. That was your luck. It prevented you from getting addicted.
I agree. I'm so glad. And honestly, it didn't touch the pain. It only made me euphoric. It never helped me with the pain. And the ketamine didn't help either. Yeah. And I just remembered what I was forgetting earlier about the symptoms. If you do this work, you don't have to worry about the symptoms. Symptoms go away as a side effect of doing the work. They go away on their own. We don't need to treat symptoms. And as Dr. Sarno said, that's bad medicine. You don't treat symptoms, you treat the cause. If you treat the cause, the body does it on its own. Just get out of your own way, and your body and brain, they want to go back to normal. They're not having fun either. They're not enjoying this. They want to go back to normal. Exactly. And side, the body is on your side. It feels like it's betrayed you, but it's not. It's actually on your side. It wants to protect you. And so you have to cultivate safety and teach your brain, I'm safe, I'm okay. And cultivating safety can take on many forms. It could be through relationships, through connection, through hobbies, through spiritual health. I mean, even a belief in God can create another layer of safety. So do things in your life to create safety. Sorry, so I just wanted to mention that because that's what I wanted to say earlier.
That's important.
Yeah,
it is very important. Yeah, I call it emotional hygiene. Yeah. If you maintain your emotional hygiene, you end up being in good spirits and in proper mental health. Yeah. That's what it is.
Yeah. Emotional intelligence and emotional awareness. And I was reading that in the Bible. Did you know that King David had back pain from guilt? Did you know?
I think I did.
Deservedly so. He was not a good guy.
He had TMS.
Yeah, TMS. He totally did. And that was during a period of time in his life when he was not, well, you could put that however in many different ways. But...
Not behaving, and he knew about it.
He had guilt on some level.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of guilt. Yeah, he was not living according to his own belief system. Absolutely.
Yep. We've known this since the beginning of time. So somehow medicine got away from common sense and what we've known for the ages. And now, unfortunately, we have this duality in our society, and we have to get back to the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And unfortunately, our official medicine is not set up, our healthcare system is not set up in the proper way, because the doctors, the MDs, they're really not expected, they're not trained to pay attention to the emotional state of the patient. Yeah. And they specialize in the body parts. You have to go to podiatrist, or you go to the hand surgeon, or you go to the eye doctor, or you go to a dermatologist, and they all treat the symptoms, but none of them treats the actual disease. Yeah. And this is what happens. CRPS eventually is when the whole body literally rebels against you because you're not living the right way of life.
Yeah. One of the first things I show my clients is a picture of a scab, and underneath it is the wound. And I'm like, we don't want to keep taking the scab off. It has nothing to do with your pain and your symptom. Let's look at what's under here, and that's, in this case, symbolically emotions and whatnot. But so I think that aligns similar with what you're saying. Like going to the doctor, we can look at the scab a lot,
Yep.
but it's not gonna heal anything. So. Okay, so we're at like an hour and 10 minutes or something. Let's Tamara, tell us about your book and just what any last statements you have, and then we'll do the same with Rita.
Okay. It was interesting. I was looking at your website and I discovered that you have a picture on your website that is almost identical to the front, to the cover of my book.
It is very close, isn't it?
It is. That's your brain in your hand.
Yeah.
That's your life in your hand. And that's what you need to do. You need to take responsibility for your life, for your health, for your relationships in your hands. You need to learn how to do the right thing, how to stand for yourself, because a lot of us end up in chronic pain because they let others abuse them.
Yep.
Emotionally, physically, and in other ways. So you need to learn all of those things, and then you will be healthy. It is actually not always easy. After you recover, you can't walk away from who you are. So you end up with potentially recurring episodes of TMS, but because of the knowledge that you acquired on the way, you now know how to recover quickly.
Yeah.
And that's really the lesson that I learned from my experience. It's not like I'm no longer immune to reoccurrences of chronic pain, but when it comes back, I know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the book is called Defying the Verdict. Is that right?
Yeah, Defying the Verdict, because the verdict for CRPS is that you have to live with it for the rest of your life, but you do not.
No,
Yes.
definitely not. Definitely not.
And I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Thank you. And our website, defeatcrps.com, and we keep updating it. Rita and I post new items on our blogs every month. There is an update, and we keep adding references to the new resources. So it's something for the CRPS patients to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Rita, last comments, and tell us about your coaching.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so I offer coaching. I really, I'm very passionate about my work, and anyone, if you would like to reach out to me, or if you need any information or advice, I'm happy to answer. You can email me at ritalabarbera@yahoo.com. And or you can find me on the Defeat CRPS site as well. You can find me there.
Okay.
You can find me on Facebook.
Is your email, is that email the same email that I emailed you at?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
I'll put that in the show notes. Okay.
I just finished a training with Dr. Dan Ratner, so I incorporate his 3-column system into my work because it's very high speed and it's very efficacious, I guess you could say. And so I'm really enjoying that. And I trained with Dr. Schubner initially. And speaking of Dr. Schubner, I just wanted to leave your listeners with a quote from his book, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is an Irish blessing, and I came across it early on in my struggle. And at the time it made me really teary-eyed. And I just wanted to leave this for your viewers. It goes like this. May I have the courage today to live the life I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but do at last what I came here for, and waste my heart on fear no more.
Yes.
It sums it up.
This is great. Yes.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is such a great summary. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
And Jennifer, thank you so much for reaching out to us. And it is such a pleasure. I really enjoyed looking at your website, and everything that you say resonates with me on a very deep level. And there is one thing that I learned from your website, not that I didn't understand it before, but it really struck me as something so clearly said. I carried burdens that weren't mine.
yeah.
A lot of us carry burdens that are not ours. And I really thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you guys are so kind. I've just valued this time with you. Thank you. I also value the time we had before this call too. So yeah, thank you.
And good luck to both of you, because you both are coaching and I do not. So it's a hard job that you do. It's really hard work. So good luck to both of you with your patients.
Oh, thank you. It's rewarding. I'm sure we love it.
Yes, it's true. All right. Well, I'm going to pause the video. So I'm going to say goodbye to all the watchers, and I will see you guys again next week. Bye.
Thanks. And
Bye.